I can't lose them. Not now, Elar whispered, his voice hoarse and choked, as Cale's dry cough echoed like a lament through the cold, ancient stones of the forgotten fort ruins. The wind howled, mocking his age and weakness, while the two small bodies, feverish and hungry, trembled uncontrollably beneath the torn cloak that barely covered them. He had promised himself he would protect them, but illness consumed them, and there, in that place forgotten by God and men, hope seemed to die with the last ember of the fire. It was then, as he tried to warm Leo's small hands, that his desperate gaze fell upon a peculiar crack in the wall. A glimpse of something, a secret the shadows had guarded for centuries, and what he was about to touch would forever change his family's destiny. Elar, with trembling fingers, reached his wrinkled hand towards the crevice in the stone. It wasn't an ordinary crack, like the many that scarred the walls of that forgotten fort, corroded by time. There was something deliberate about it, an almost perfect line that disappeared among moss and centuries of dust, as if drawn with a hidden purpose. His heart, already so battered by pain, leaped with expectation mixed with an ancestral dread. What secret could be hidden there in such a desolate place? With an effort that seemed to drain his last strength, he fumbled at the cold stone, feeling its roughness and dampness. His eyes, accustomed to the gloom of that precarious refuge, searched for any clue, any protrusion or indentation that might reveal the nature of that mystery. It was then that his fingers found a small protrusion, almost imperceptible to the touch, hidden beneath a layer of soot and debris. With the tip of his thumb, he pressed it with all his meager strength. A dull, slow creak echoed through the ruins, making him hold his breath, the sound seeming amplified by the silence. The stone around the crack began to give way, moving with agonizing slowness, revealing a small, dark and cold niche. Elar stepped back, his body tense, his gaze fixed on what emerged from the shadows. Inside the recess, there was no gold or glittering jewels, no material riches, but something far more precious to a man in his situation. An ancient parchment, yellowed by time, and a small leather pouch that seemed to contain something solid and heavy. With reverent care, as if touching a piece of his own soul, Elar reached out again and pulled out the parchment. The paper was fragile, almost crumbling in his hands, but the lines and symbols drawn on it were surprisingly clear and detailed. It was a map, an ancient map, with markings of rugged mountains and winding rivers, and in the center a point marked with a symbol he didn't recognize, but which radiated an aura of importance. His eyes traced the lines, his mind trying to decipher the secrets that piece of paper held. A flame of hope, small and flickering like the last ember of the fire, ignited in his chest, warming him from within. Could this be the answer to his silent prayers, to the despair that consumed him? He looked at Leo and Cale, whose wheezing breaths were the only melody in that oppressive silence, a reminder of their fragility. Kyle's fever seemed to have lessened slightly, but Leo was paler than ever, a cold sweat covering his forehead. The sight of his sick and helpless grandsons tightened his heart. That map, however promising it seemed, represented an uncertain journey, an unknown danger. How could he, a frail old man, embark on such an adventure with the boys in their delicate state? The fear of leaving them alone or exposing them to more risks was a heavy burden that oppressed him. But the alternative was inaction, waiting for death that seemed to lurk in every shadow, with every cough. No, he couldn't surrender. The promise he had made to himself and to the memory of his deceased wife echoed in his soul. He would protect them whatever the cost, until his last breath. If that map was the last hope, he would cling to it with tooth and nail. With his free hand, Elar opened the small leather pouch. Inside, he found some ancient coins, made of a metal he didn't recognize, and a small glass vial containing a dark, dense liquid. There was no label, no indication of what it was. Was it poison? or a miraculous cure? An agonizing dilemma seized him. Uncertainty was an abyss. But the sight of Leo and Kale's feverish little faces, Kale's weak cough, Leo's shallow breathing, were a cruel reminder of the urgency of his situation. Ilar pressed the map against his chest, feeling the faint warmth that seemed to emanate from it, as if the paper itself were alive with promise. He needed to understand the map, decipher its secrets, and find the path to his grandson's salvation. Exhaustion weighed on his shoulders, but a new, cold, iron determination began to form in his gaze. He would not fail. Clutching the map to his chest, Ilar felt the faint warmth of hope, but also the icy cold of responsibility weighing on his stooped shoulders. His eyes, clouded by exhaustion and unshed tears, turned to the small glass vial. The dark liquid danced within, mysterious and menacing, an enigma that could be both salvation and damnation. The image of Leo and Kale's pale faces, seared into his mind, was a constant torment. How could he risk the lives of the only beings who still gave meaning to his existence with something so uncertain? He couldn't. Not yet. With the delicacy of a goldsmith handling a rare jewel, Ilar unrolled the parchment. The weak, flickering light of the dying fire barely illuminated the complex markings. Mountains with sharp peaks that seemed to scratch the sky, rivers that snaked like veins across the land, and dense forests were depicted with surprising precision for something so ancient. In the center, the unknown symbol that had once radiated an aura of importance now seemed like a mocking enigma, challenging his weary mind. His wrinkled fingers traced the lines, searching for a logic, a clue that might unravel the mystery. He remembered the stories he used to tell the boys before bed, of great explorers and hidden treasures, but he never imagined reality could be so cruelly challenging. Kale coughed again, a dry, rasping sound that tore through the oppressive silence of the ruins and Ilar's heart. The boy writhed slightly under the cloak, fever consuming him, a sickly heat radiating from his small body. Ilar rushed to him, placing a trembling hand on his hot forehead. "My little Kyle," he whispered, his voice choked with pain and fear. Leo, for his part, remained motionless, his breathing almost imperceptible. A faint thread of life. With each passing second, life seemed to drain from their fragile bodies, and time was a relentless enemy. He returned to the map, his feverish mind searching for a solution, any hint of hope. His eyes fell upon the ancient coins in the leather pouch. He picked them up, feeling the unusual weight of the cold metal in his palm. One of them bore an inscription, a set of characters he had never seen, but which seemed familiar somehow, like a distant echo of a forgotten past. He strained to remember, to pull from memory some legend, some tale from his youth. His wife, sweet Ilara, used to read to him from ancient books filled with wisdom and mysteries, her soft words lulling him on cold nights. Could she have read something about this? A flash of memory, a similar symbol, in one of the heraldry books Ilara loved so much, a heavy, dusty volume she cherished. It was not a symbol of material wealth, of gold and jewels, but of knowledge, of an ancient order of sages dedicated to preserving history and, more importantly, healing. His eyes, previously dull, widened with a new light. What if the treasure wasn't gold, but a legacy of wisdom? Perhaps even the cure for the illness that was stealing his grandson's lives. The idea was audacious, almost insane, but it ignited a new flame of hope in his chest, warming him from within. He needed more light, more clarity to decipher the parchment's secrets. With a monumental effort that made his old muscles protest, Ilar dragged himself to the dying campfire, adding the few remaining twigs. The flames licked the wood, offering a faint glow, but enough for him to examine the map more closely. The central symbol now looked more like a stylized eye, surrounded by spirals that resembled the flow of life, and there was a minuscule, almost invisible detail he hadn't noticed before. A sequence of small markings along one of the routes, as if they were instructions or coordinates for a specific path. His heart pounded, driven by renewed strength. This was not a map of plunder, but a guide. A guide to something far greater than he could imagine. The route pointed to the mountains to the east, a dangerous and inhospitable region, but one he knew from his youth, a place of legends and secrets where his father used to mention a hidden cave. Could that be the destination? Exhaustion threatened him, but determination was stronger. He needed to follow that path, not just for his grandsons, but to honor Ilara's memory and the promise of life she always represented. He looked at the boys, his sleeping angels in the gloom, and swore he would find the cure. The promise echoed in his chest, a silent oath that transcended pain and weariness. Ilar looked at Leo and Kyle, their pale faces illuminated by the flickering firelight. There was no time to hesitate, to doubt. The cure was a mountain to be climbed, and he, old and frail as he was, would be the guide. But how? How would he take the boys along dangerous trails, with fever consuming them with every breath? His eyes returned to the parchment. The stylized eye symbol seemed to wink, inviting him to delve deeper into the secrets it held. The small markings along the route, once just coordinates, now seemed to whisper a story, a forgotten language. Ilar brought the ancient coin, the one with the peculiar inscription, closer to the map. A shiver ran down his spine. The lines on the coin strangely resembled one of the smaller, almost imperceptible symbols in the corner of the parchment. Could it be a key? With wrinkled fingers, he traced the symbol on the coin and then on the map. A strange, almost electric sensation ran through him. It was as if the pieces of an ancient puzzle were beginning to fit together. The symbol on the map, which he had thought was merely a geographical marking, seemed to be a pictorial representation of the dark liquid vial. And the spirals around the eye on the map, which resembled the flow of life, seemed to connect with the idea of healing and knowledge that Ilara so valued. He picked up the vial again. The liquid danced, opaque and dense. The temptation to administer it to the boys was immense, but the fear of making a mistake, of causing more harm, was a giant in his path. He remembered the legend Ilara used to tell about the sages of the mountain, an ancient order that guarded secrets of healing and wisdom, and whose symbol was a watchful eye. The cave his father had mentioned in the mountains to the east was said to be one of these sages' refuges. "Whatever the risk, my angels, I will take it for you," Ilar whispered, his voice choked. With trembling hands he opened the vial. The scent was earthy, with a hint of something herbal and slightly sweet. Unlike any poison he knew, it was an aroma that seemed to come from the earth itself, from ancient forests. With the tip of his finger, he moistened the skin near Kyle's lips, the boy who coughed the most. The skin absorbed the liquid quickly. He waited, his heart pounding erratically, each second an eternity. Kyle stirred. A subtle, almost imperceptible movement, but one that made Ilar's breath catch in his throat. The boy let out a deeper sigh, and the cough, which had been dry and rasping, seemed to soften, becoming less forced. It wasn't a miraculous cure, not yet, but it was a sign, a small spark of hope that ignited in the darkness. Ilar's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not of despair, but of overwhelming relief. He repeated the gesture with Leo, applying a tiny drop of the liquid to his pale lips. Leo remained motionless, but his breathing, which had been almost inaudible, seemed to gain a more constant, less shallow rhythm. Ilar felt a wave of gratitude, a strength that seemed to come from his wife, from his ancestors, from the fort itself. The liquid was not poison. It was a balm, a temporary relief perhaps, but a sign that the path the map indicated was the right one. The decision was made. He couldn't wait. With each passing minute, The illness stole his grandson's strength. He needed to leave, and quickly, but not without them. He would take them. With a care that bordered on reverence, Elar began to plan. He would need a way to transport them, to keep them warm and safe during the journey. His eyes scanned the ruins, searching for anything that might be useful. An old, torn canvas, pieces of wood, forgotten ropes. With each discovery, hope solidified, transforming despair into an iron determination. He would find the treasure, the legacy of knowledge, the cure, and his grandsons would live. Elar's determination was a living flame, but the journey imposed a heavy burden. He needed to transport Leo and Kale, fragile, protecting them from the cold and dangers. His eyes swept the ruins, searching for resources. The old canvas, once a shelter, would be the base. With wrinkled, agile hands, he unfolded it, feeling the roughness of the fabric. Pieces of wood, remnants of corroded beams, lay scattered. Elar gathered them, testing their strength. Without tools, only the strength of his arms and the urgency of love. He found thick, tangled ropes. With a rusty penknife, he cut them and untied the knots. His fingertips aching. The plan, an improvised stretcher. He would use strong wood for the frame, interlacing ropes for a firm base. The canvas would line it, protecting the boys from the cold ground. Every movement was slow, deliberate, accompanied by Kale's soft moans and Leo's shallow breathing. With each cough, Elar felt anxiety, a cruel reminder of the race against time. He worked tirelessly under the pale moonlight. His shoulders and back protested, but the image of his sick grandsons was a balm. Leo seemed calmer after the drop of liquid, his lips less pale, the cold sweat diminished. Kyle, though still coughing, did so with less intensity, and his eyes showed a faint glimmer of consciousness. The balm was a blessing, a breath of fresh air. With the stretcher assembled, rustic and robust, Elar lined it with the rest of the cloak and dry leaves. He tested the weight, dragging it. It was heavy, but bearable. The challenge would be the steep mountain trails. He knelt beside the boys, his heart heavy. "My little warriors," he whispered, stroking Leo's damp hair. "We're going home." With strength he didn't know he possessed, Elar lifted Leo first, cradling him. The boy curled up but didn't protest. Next, Kale. The movement woke him. "Grandpa," he murmured, his voice weak. Elar smiled, trembling, his tired eyes not quite meeting Kale's. "We're going, my son, to a place where you'll get well." He covered the boys with the canvas and the cloak, ensuring they were warm and safe. The map, rolled up at his belt, was his compass. The almost empty vial of balm was secure in his pouch. Night advanced, the cold intensified. There was no more time. With a last look at the ruins, his refuge, Elar gripped the stretcher ropes. The main gate of the fort, a collapsed archway, was the exit. Each step was a struggle, the stretcher dragging heavily. The icy wind whipped his face, but he ignored it. His eyes were fixed on the promise of dawn, on the hope of a new beginning. He felt Elara's presence, a whisper of encouragement. The journey would be long and arduous, but he was not alone. Family, hope, and love were his guide. He crossed the threshold, leaving the past behind and moving forward into the unknown, certain that true wealth lay in the lives of his grandsons. Elar crossed the threshold, the fort's collapsed archway seeming like a portal to an uncertain future. The stretcher, with Leo and Kyle nestled beneath the canvas and cloak, dragged heavily over the loose stones of the outer courtyard. Each step was a monumental effort, his old muscles crying out for rest, but the sight of his grandsons' pale faces was the fuel that propelled him. The cold of the medieval night was biting, and the wind, which had previously only whispered through the cracks in the ruins, now whipped his wrinkled face, bringing with it the damp scent of earth and the foreboding of an arduous journey. He struggled to maintain his pace, his eyes fixed on the darkness ahead, where the imposing silhouette of the eastern mountains rose like a distant, menacing promise. The route on the map had seemed simple under the flickering firelight, but now, beneath the oppressive shroud of night, every shadow seemed to hide an obstacle, every distant sound a threat. Kyle coughed again, a muffled sound that resonated in the night's silence like a drum in his chest. Elar stopped for an instant, his heart heavy, and leaned over the stretcher. Kyle opened his eyes, clouded, and tried to lift his small hand, but weakness prevented him. "Grandpa," he murmured, his voice almost inaudible. Elar stroked the boy's hot forehead, feeling the fever still present, despite the balm. "I'm here, my angel. We're almost there." The lie, spoken with pure intention, hurt his throat. He didn't know where "there" was, or if they would even arrive. Leo, for his part, remained in a deep sleep, his breathing more regular but still fragile. Elar felt a mixture of relief and dread. The balm had helped, but it was only a palliative. The true cure, the true knowledge, lay in the mountains. He took a deep breath, pulling the stretcher ropes with renewed determination. The path began to gently incline, leading them out of the Valley of Ruins and to the base of the hills that preceded the great mountain range. The vegetation grew denser, the trees darker and more twisted, skeletal branches pointing to the starry sky. Elar felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. With each step, exhaustion threatened to fell him. The map, which he had rolled up and fastened to his belt, seemed to burn against his skin, a constant reminder of his responsibility. He stopped again, panting, and leaned against an ancient tree, its rough bark scratching his hand. His eyes scanned the landscape, searching for a reference point, a confirmation that he was on the right path. The moonlight, now clearer, bathed the forest in a silvery, ethereal glow. It was then that his eyes fell upon something unusual. Covered by a dense layer of moss and ivy, half buried in the damp earth, stood a stone monolith. It wasn't large, about a man's height, but its peculiar shape was carved with a precision that defied time. Elar approached, his heart beating faster. With wrinkled fingers he removed the moss, revealing a series of symbols engraved on the stone. They were the same characters he had seen on the ancient coin, and also one of the smaller symbols in the corner of the map parchment. The watchful eye of the sages of the mountain was there, carved with surprising clarity. A shiver ran down his spine, not of fear but of deep reverence. This was not merely a marking, it was a confirmation, a message from the ancients. The monolith seemed to point to a narrow crevice in the rock, almost invisible among the dense foliage, which he hadn't noticed before. Was it a shortcut or a secret passage? Emotion flooded him, mixing with his weariness. This was the turning point, the sign he had so eagerly awaited. The path was not just physical, but also a test of faith and insight. The treasure was not just a destination, but a journey of hidden discoveries. With a new breath, Elar felt a wave of energy course through his body. He was not lost, he was being guided. He looked at his grandsons, asleep on the stretcher, and a faint but genuine smile bloomed on his lips. Hope, which at times had seemed like a ghost, now materialized in stone and light. The crevice in the rock was too narrow for the stretcher. Elar realized he would have to dismantle it and carry the boys one by one. It would be slower, more exhausting, but the promise of a safer, perhaps even quicker path beckoned. He knew that every decision was crucial. With a sigh of determination, he began to untie the stretcher ropes, preparing for the next challenge. Feeling that true wealth lay in the lives of his grandsons and in the wisdom that was now revealing itself. Elar, his hands trembling from exhaustion and anxiety, began to untie the ropes of the improvised stretcher. Each knot seemed too tight, each tie a barrier between him and the hope the rock crevice promised. His wrinkled, calloused fingers worked with silent urgency, the flickering moonlight barely penetrating the dense foliage that obscured the passage entrance. He knew this was the only option. The crevice was narrow, dark, and there was no way to drag the stretcher through it. He would have to carry his grandsons one by one, a task that seemed superhuman for his already battered body. With a deep sigh, Elar knelt beside Leo, the more fragile of the two, who remained in a restless sleep. With the utmost delicacy he lifted him, cradling the small body against his chest. Leo was light, but the fragility of his life in Elar's hands was an overwhelming weight. The old lord felt the heat of the fever through the boy's thin clothes, and the sweet earthy scent of the balm, now almost imperceptible, brought a pang of hope and fear. He needed to be quick but careful. Approaching the crevice, Elar hesitated for an instant. The passage was like a dark mouth in the rock, damp and cold. He squeezed through, feeling the rough stones scratch his clothes and skin. The space was so tight he could barely breathe, and the fear that Leo might be hurt in his arms made him advance with agonizing slowness. Every inch was a battle, his shoulders scraping against the rocky walls, his feet searching for purchase on uneven, slippery ground. The darkness was almost total, and Elar could only feel the way ahead, guided by intuition and determination. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, he emerged into a small recess in the rock, a slightly wider space where he could breathe. Leo, despite the tumultuous journey, had not woken. Elar carefully laid him on a cloak he had brought with him, ensuring he was protected from the biting cold. His heart was torn, relief at having crossed with Leo, and a searing anguish at having left Kyle alone, even if only for a few minutes. The image of Kyle's pale little face, coughing in the gloom, was a torment. He turned and with the same urgency returned through the crevice. The return seemed even longer, the emptiness in his arms a constant reminder of his mission. Upon reaching the entrance again, Kyle was exactly where he had left him, still coughing softly, but with his eyes half open, fixed on nothing. "Grandpa," he whispered, his voice more a breath than a sound. Elar felt a pang of guilt for having left him, even out of necessity. "I'm here, my warrior. Come, it's your turn." With the same tenderness, Elar lifted Kyle, the boy curling into his arms. The fever was palpable, and the cough, though less violent, still shook him. With each step through the crevice, Elar murmured words of comfort, promises of healing, of a future where cold and illness would be but distant memories. He felt the connection with Elara, his wife, who seemed to whisper in his ear, giving him strength. The passage was a portal, not just of stone, but of hope. When he finally emerged from the crevice with Kyle, finding Leo asleep, Elar felt a relief that made him stagger. He laid Kyle beside his brother, covering them with the cloak. His eyes swept the new environment. It was not a cave, but a natural tunnel, wider and smoother than the crevice, extending into the mountain. The moonlight, filtered through an opening in the rocky ceiling, created a mystical glow. On the ground, he noticed ancient footprints, almost erased by time, and a feeling that he was not the first to follow this path invaded him. The wisdom of the sages of the mountain seemed to envelop the place, guiding him to the next step. True wealth was not gold, but the discovery of a path, of a legacy that promised not only healing, but the renewal of life. He knelt, exhausted, but with a heart overflowing with silent gratitude, ready for what came next. Elar, kneeling on the damp tunnel floor, felt the weight of years and the journey in every fiber of his being. His eyes, accustomed to the gloom, swept the surroundings. The natural tunnel, more welcoming than the crevice he had just traversed, stretched ahead, a dark throat in the mountain. The moonlight, which had previously filtered through an opening, now grew fainter, almost a luminous whisper that barely reached the interior. He rose with a muffled groan, his knees cracking, and approached his grandsons. Leo and Kale slept side by side, protected by the cloak, their faces pale and serene in the darkness. Kyle still coughed occasionally, a soft sound that broke the old man's heart, but both their breaths seemed calmer, a small miracle attributed to the balm and his own unwavering faith. With a care that bordered on reverence, Elar picked up a piece of wood he had brought, lit it from the small flame still burning in his improvised lantern, and used it as a torch. The flickering light danced on the rocky walls, revealing veins of quartz and strange formations that resembled sleeping figures. The ancient footprints on the ground, which he had noticed before, became more visible, a faint trail that seemed to invite him to follow. They were not just footprints. They were deep grooves, made by many feet over centuries, a silent testament that others had trodden this path in search of wisdom or refuge. With each step, Elar felt the connection to those who preceded him, an invisible current of hope. He picked up Leo and then Kale, cradling them in his arms one by one, and began to advance. The tunnel was uneven, with gentle ascents and descents, and the air grew fresher, laden with the scent of wet earth and minerals, an aroma of life and ancestral secrets. Elar felt the presence of the sages of the mountain, not as ghosts, but as silent guides, whose stories his wife Elara loved to tell so much. He murmured words of encouragement, silent promises to the sleeping boys and to the memory of his beloved wife, who seemed to walk beside him. With each step, exhaustion threatened to fell him, but the image of his healthy grandsons, running through the fields of their old home, was a beacon in his mind that propelled him forward. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a larger circular chamber with an opening in the ceiling that allowed a beam of moonlight to enter, bathing the surroundings in a silvery, ethereal glow. In the center of the chamber, a pillar of polished stone rose, smooth to the touch, yet with an imposing presence that transcended simplicity. On it, carved with an artistry that defied the passage of time, was the symbol of the watchful eye, identical to that on the coin and the map, now illuminated by the celestial light. Elar felt a shiver run down his spine, not of fear, but of deep reverence. This was not merely a marking, it was an altar, a convergence point of knowledge and faith, a sanctuary of hope. Around the pillar, there were niches skillfully carved into the rock, and within one of them, carefully hidden, lay a small, dark wooden chest, aged by time but intact, its surface smooth and cold to the touch. With his grandson still in his arms, Elar approached, his heart pounding in his chest, a mixture of apprehension and expectation. He carefully placed Leo and Kale on the ground, on the soft cloak, ensuring they were safe and warm, and knelt before the chest. His hands, wrinkled and calloused by life, trembled as he opened it. Inside, to his surprise and relief, there was no gold or glittering jewels, but something of inestimable value: rolled parchments, tied with worn leather ribbons, and a glass vial, identical to the one he possessed, but filled to the brim with the dark, miraculous balm. A smile of relief and gratitude, so profound it reached his tired eyes, spread across his wrinkled face. True wealth was there, not in shining coins, but in ancestral knowledge and healing. He picked up one of the parchments, unrolling it carefully. The moonlight revealed ancient, elegant calligraphy and detailed drawings of medicinal plants and herbs, accompanied by precise instructions. It was a compendium of wisdom, the legacy of the sages of the mountain, a guide to life and health. Tears streamed down his face, not of sadness, but of a pure and overwhelming joy, a feeling that the universe had conspired in his favor. He had found what he sought and much more. The journey, though arduous and full of sacrifices, had been rewarded in a way he could never have imagined. His grandsons would live, and with them, the hope of a prosperous and happy future. Elah, with the parchments in his hands and the vial of miraculous balm clutched to his chest, felt his entire body tremble. It wasn't the cold, nor exhaustion, but a torrent of emotions that overwhelmed him. The joy was so intense it seemed to hurt, a counterpoint to the pain and despair that had accompanied him for so long. His tear-filled eyes fixed on his sleeping grandsons. Leo and Kyle, so small and fragile, were the reason for his existence, the beacon that guided him through the darkness. With hands that still trembled, but now with renewed purpose, Elah opened the newly discovered vial. The dark, dense liquid gleamed in the faint moonlight, a promise of life. He knelt beside Leo first, the boy who seemed closest to the abyss. With the utmost care, Elah poured a few drops of the balm onto his grandson's pale lips. Leo swallowed with difficulty, a small spasm in his throat. Elah watched, holding his breath, every fiber of his being focused on the boy's reaction. In a few moments, Leo's breathing, which had been shallow and irregular, seemed to deepen, and the cold sweat on his forehead diminished. A faint, almost imperceptible color began to return to his cheeks. A sigh of relief escaped Elah's lips, heavy and liberating. He repeated the gesture with Kyle, who coughed softly upon tasting the liquid. The boy, though more resilient, also seemed to absorb the cure with a silent eagerness. The cough subsided almost immediately, and his eyes, which had barely opened before, now showed a more vivid, though still sleepy, gleam. Elah stroked Kyle's hair, feeling the fever recede, replaced by a milder, more natural temperature. With his grandsons now under the balm's effect, Elah felt an urgency to understand the legacy he held. He picked up the parchment he had unrolled and brought it closer to the opening in the ceiling, where the moonlight was strongest. The ancient calligraphy, though complex, revealed secrets about the balm's preparation, the harvesting of rare herbs, and, most importantly, the philosophy of the sages of the mountain, a life in harmony with nature, the pursuit of knowledge, and the importance of caring for one another. There were drawings of plants he had never seen, extraction methods, and even recipes to strengthen body and mind. Elah realized that the treasure was not just a cure for his grandson's illness, but a guide to a new way of life, one that valued wisdom and compassion above all else. He felt a deep connection with those sages, as if they were there, beside him, sharing their knowledge across time. A tired but hope-filled smile illuminated Elah's face. The image of Elara, his wife, appeared in his mind, and he felt a comforting warmth. She had always believed in the inherent goodness of the world, even in the darkest times. This discovery was proof that her faith had not been in vain. He felt grateful, not only for the cure, but for the renewal of his own soul. The journey would not end there. He needed to absorb all that knowledge, learn to apply it, and then take his grandsons to a place where they could flourish, far from the shadows of the past. The fort's ruins, his old refuge, now seemed like a starting point for a new era, not an end. He imagined a future where Leo and Kyle would be healthy, running through the fields, growing strong and curious, and he, Elah, would be the guardian of that legacy, transforming pain and loss into a future of prosperity and peace for his small family. True wealth, he knew, lay in the life he could now offer them, in the unwavering hope he had found in the depths of the mountain, a gift from the sages and his beloved Elara. He sat down, the parchments carefully arranged beside him, ready to delve into the wisdom of the ancients, feeling that a new dawn was about to break, bringing with it the promise of a new beginning. Elah sat, the parchments carefully arranged beside him, ready to delve into the wisdom of the ancients, feeling that a new dawn was about to break, bringing with it the promise of a new beginning. With a sigh that carried the weight of a life of struggles and the lightness of newfound hope, he picked up the first parchment. The moonlight, now more generous, bathed the chamber, allowing his tired eyes to decipher the symbols and drawings. The letters, though ancient and intricate, began to reveal their secrets with surprising clarity, as if the mountain itself whispered the sage's truths directly into his soul. He read about the interconnectedness of all living things, the importance of fertile earth, pure water, and fresh air for the health of body and spirit. It was not just medicine, but a philosophy of life, a way of being that Elar felt resonated deeply in his heart, awakening memories of conversations with his beloved Ilara. As he absorbed each word, his attentive ears caught Leo and Kale's breathing. The sound was softer, more rhythmic, and Kyle's sporadic cough had considerably diminished. Leo, who had previously seemed to float between life and death, now slept with a serenity Elar hadn't seen in weeks. In an almost instinctive gesture, the old lord reached out to touch Leo's forehead, feeling the skin cooler, without the feverish heat that had so distressed him. A solitary tear streamed down his wrinkled face, an overwhelming mixture of relief and gratitude that overflowed his heart. He knew that healing was not a single event, but a continuous process, and those parchments were the detailed map for this journey of recovery and well-being. The writing spoke of a secret garden on the higher slopes of the mountain, where the most potent herbs grew in abundance, and of ancestral methods to purify spring water and build shelters that would withstand the harshest winters, using only natural resources. Elar realized that the knowledge contained therein went far beyond physical healing. It was a complete manual for survival and prosperity, a way to transform adversity into opportunity and desolation into a home. He imagined the fort's ruins, his temporary refuge, no longer as a place of exile and despair, but as fertile ground for this new wisdom. Could he, an old widower, with hands calloused by the sword and not the hoe, learn to cultivate, to heal, to build a solid future for his grandsons? Doubt was a distant whisper, but determination was a powerful cry in his chest, echoing the resilience Ilara had always praised in him. Ilara, his beloved wife, had always dreamed of a life in harmony with nature, far from the intrigues and cruelty of court. She would have loved this place, these parchments, this promise of peace. Elar felt her presence, a comforting warmth that propelled him with each new discovery. He envisioned Leo and Kale, not just healthy, but strong, curious, learning with him the secrets of the mountain, growing up in an environment of peace, knowledge, and love. The reconstruction would not be just of the fort's stones and walls, but of lives, of a renewed family legacy. He would spend the next days, perhaps weeks, immersed in that sanctuary of knowledge, absorbing every drop of wisdom, meticulously preparing for the return. The journey to the treasure had ended, but the journey to rebuild his family and his renewed purpose was just beginning. The sun would soon begin to rise, and with it, the promise of a new day, of a new beginning, where true hope was no longer a ghost, but a palpable reality, woven with the wisdom of the ancients and the unwavering love of a family. Elar, with the parchment spread around him like a map of a new world, delved into the sage's words. Every line and detailed drawing of herbs and rituals was a thread of light, weaving knowledge that transcended time. He read about patience, attentive observation of nature, and gratitude for every gift of the earth. It was not wisdom for the powerful, but for the humble, for those who sought truth in the simplicity of life. His wrinkled fingers traced illustrations of plants he had never imagined existed, and his mind absorbed instructions for cultivating them, extracting healing essences, purifying water, and building shelters in harmony with the environment. Time seemed to dissolve in the chamber. Elar felt neither hunger nor cold, only an insatiable thirst for learning. From time to time, his eyes drifted to Leo and Kale, The boys now slept deeply, their faces more relaxed, their breathing regular and soft. The fever had subsided, and a faint blush of life began to color their pale cheeks. Ela touched their foreheads, feeling their temperature normalized, and a lump in his throat dissolved into silent tears of pure joy. The balm, the wisdom, the faith, everything had converged for this moment of miracle. The parchments revealed not only physical healing, but a path to spiritual renewal. They spoke of a peaceful community, where knowledge was shared and mutual aid was the foundation. Ela, who had known the rigidity of courts and the cruelty of war, felt his heart soften. The idea of building such a place, of transforming the forgotten fort ruins into a sanctuary of life and learning, began to take shape. It would not just be a refuge, but a new beginning, a legacy for his grandsons and for all who sought a greater purpose. He imagined Leo and Kale no longer sick and frail, but running through the fields, their laughter echoing among the walls of the rebuilt fort. He envisioned himself teaching them the secrets of herbs, the art of cultivating the land, the importance of caring for one another. The pain of Ilara's loss was still there, a distant echo, but now accompanied by a certainty. She would have approved of every step, every decision. Her unwavering strength and faith propelled him. With the last parchment in hand, Ilar read about the heart of the mountain, a place of profound energy and peace, where the sages gathered to meditate and seek inspiration. He felt that the chamber itself was an extension of this heart, a sacred place where hope was reborn. The moonlight, which had previously bathed the surroundings, began to give way to a golden, growing glow. The majestic sun peeked through the opening in the ceiling, painting the chamber with shades of orange and pink, announcing the new day. Ilar stood up, his knees still aching, but his spirit invigorated. He looked at his grandsons, at the parchments, at the light of dawn. An unwavering decision solidified in his chest. He would not only heal Leo and Kale, he would rebuild their lives. The forgotten fort would no longer be a symbol of his lost past, but the foundation of a prosperous future, a testament to family resilience and unwavering hope. The climax was not a battle, but the full acceptance of a purpose, the clear vision of a path. He was the guardian of a legacy, and with the sun rising, he knew the true journey was just beginning. Ilar, bathed in the golden light of dawn that flooded the chamber, felt a renewed energy course through his tired body. Exhaustion was still there, a physical reminder of the long night, but now it was accompanied by a mental clarity and purpose he had lacked. He looked at Leo and Kyle, still asleep, but with a serenity that warmed his heart. The sickly pallor had disappeared, replaced by a healthier, more rosy tone. Leo, the most fragile, stirred gently, a small sigh escaping his lips. Ilar knelt beside him, his heart pounding. The boy slowly opened his eyes, blinking against the light, and a faint but genuine smile appeared on his face. "Grandpa," Leo whispered, his voice still hoarse, but with a strength Ilar hadn't heard in weeks. His blue eyes, once dull, now sparkled with childlike curiosity. Ilar felt the tears return, of a joy so pure it filled him completely. He embraced his grandson tenderly, a hug that contained all his prayers and hopes. "Yes, my love. Grandpa is here. You're better, my little warrior," Ilar replied, his voice choked with emotion. Kyle, awakened by the commotion, began to stir. His brown eyes opened, and he looked at his brother and grandfather with surprise. What happened?" he asked, the cough that had tormented him absent. Ilar smiled, his wrinkled face illuminated. "What happened is, we found the cure, my grandsons, and a new beginning." He showed them the almost empty vial of balm and the parchments. "The sages of the mountain guided us. You will be strong and healthy again." In the boys, though still weak, felt the truth in their grandfather's words. Leo reached out to touch one of the parchments, his eyes wide. Is this magic, Grandpa?" "It's wisdom, Leo. The wisdom of caring for life," Elar explained. "And now, we will use it to rebuild all that we lost, and much more." With the help of the boys, who could now sit up, Elar organized the parchments and the vial. He explained with simplicity about the herbs, pure water, and harmony with nature. He felt Ilara's presence, his wife, like a warm breath on his shoulder, approving every decision. She had always believed that knowledge was the greatest treasure, and now he understood why. The first task, Elar decided, would be to return to the forgotten fort. No longer as a refuge of despair, but as the place where new life would flourish. The parchment spoke of techniques for purifying water and finding the secret garden of herbs on the mountain slopes. He knew he would need time, patience, and much work, but the sight of a recovered Leo and Kale, running and playing, was the fuel that propelled him. "Let's go back to the fort, my boys," Elar said, helping them to their feet. "There we will transform the ruins into a home, a place where illness will have no sway, and where hope will be our greatest fortress." The boys, though still confused, felt their grandfather's strength and determination. They nestled into his arms as Elar led them out of the chamber, back through the tunnel. The sun was already high when they emerged from the mountain, bathing the world in a golden, warm glow. The fort's ruins, visible in the distance, looked different now. They were no longer a symbol of loss, but an invitation to resilience, family, and unwavering hope. Elar felt that true wealth lay not in stones or gold, but in the promise of a future he could now build with his own hands and with the love of his grandsons. The journey of healing and rebuilding had begun. The journey of healing and rebuilding had begun. Every step Elar, Leo, and Kale took towards the forgotten fort was a silent celebration of life reborn. The boys, though still recovering, walked with an energy Elar hadn't seen in a long time. Their curious eyes observed the world, and Kyle's cough was now just a distant memory. Elar, with the parchments and the empty balm vial carefully stored, felt the weight of responsibility, but also the lightness of hope. The ruins, which had once seemed like a tomb for his ambitions, now revealed themselves as fertile ground for a new beginning. Upon arrival, Elar immediately began to apply the sage's wisdom. First, the purification of water from the nearby spring, following the detailed drawings on the parchments. Leo and Kyle, full of new vitality, helped collect stones and filter the water, their faces smudged with dirt, but radiant with joy. With each drop of clear water, Elar saw the promise of health and a prosperous future. In the days that followed, the forgotten fort witnessed a remarkable transformation. Elar, guided by the parchments, identified medicinal herbs on the mountain slopes and began cultivating a small garden within the walls. He taught Leo and Kyle to recognize plants, to prepare infusions, and to understand nature's delicate dance. The old lord's calloused hands, once accustomed to the sword, now wielded the hoe with surprising dexterity. The boys, free from illness, ran through the newly cultivated fields, their laughter echoing where once there had only been silence and despair. The fort, little by little, ceased to be a refuge of exile and became a vibrant home. The rebuilding was not limited to cultivation. Elar, with the tireless help of his grandsons, used the sage's knowledge to reinforce the fort's structures, creating more resilient and comfortable shelters. They learned to use earth and stone intelligently, to harness sunlight, and to protect themselves from the wind. The work was arduous, but with each wall raised, each roof repaired, each fire lit that warmed the surroundings, a sense of accomplishment filled their hearts. The community, though small, was strong, united by the purpose of building a future. Elar felt Ilara's presence in every cultivated patch of earth, in every smile of the boys, in every ray of sunlight that bathed the fort. Months turned into years. Leo and Kale grew, strong and healthy, their bodies robust and their minds curious. They were no longer the fragile boys Elar had carried through the mountain, but young apprentices, guardians of the sage's knowledge. They mastered the art of herbal healing, sustainable agriculture, and construction in harmony with nature. The forgotten fort, once a symbol of ruin, flourished under their care, becoming an oasis of life and wisdom. Other families, drawn by the prosperity and peace emanating from the place, began to approach, seeking to learn and contribute. Ilar, his heart overflowing with gratitude, welcomed everyone, sharing the legacy he had found. Ilar, now with completely white hair and a face marked by wrinkles that told stories of overcoming, watched his grandsons and the community that had flourished around them. Leo and Kyle, with the wisdom of the ancients in their hands and the strength of youth in their hearts, were living proof that hope never dies. The pain of Ilara's loss had transformed into a sweet memory, a beacon that had guided him through the darkness. He had fulfilled his promise, not only by healing his grandsons, but by building a legacy of prosperity and peace. The forgotten fort was no longer forgotten. It was a living testament to family resilience and the unwavering strength of the human spirit, a place where true wealth flourished in every smile and every gesture of love and sharing. The sun bathed the forgotten fort with a generous light, filtering through the leaves of the fruit trees Leo and Kyle had planted years ago. Ilar, sitting on a stone bench he had helped carve himself, watched the scene with a serene glint in his eyes. The air was fragrant with the smell of fresh bread from the communal bakery and the sweet aroma of medicinal herbs growing abundantly in the well-tended beds. Children, some his grandchildren, others of the new residents, ran and played in the central courtyard, their laughter echoing among the restored walls. There was no longer the oppressive silence of despair, but a symphony of life and joy. Leo, now a strong young man with a keen gaze, was in the garden, teaching a group of newcomers to identify the most potent herbs. His hands, once frail, moved with the confidence of a master, and his voice, once a whisper, was clear and full of gentle authority. Kyle, for his part, supervised the water purification at the spring, ensuring the sage's methods were followed to the letter. He had an easy smile and an open heart, always ready to help, to share the knowledge his grandfather had passed on to them. Elar felt immense pride seeing them, not just healed, but transformed into pillars of that new society. Each day, more families arrived, drawn by stories of a place where ancestral wisdom met hope. Ilar, though older, still participated actively, guiding, advising, but primarily observing the seed he had planted flourish. He remembered the dark days, the fever that consumed his grandsons, the despair that suffocated him in the ruins. Now every corner of the fort was a testament to overcoming, to resilience. The stone walls, once cold and desolate, radiated warmth and life, adorned with climbing plants and wildflowers that Leo and Kale had encouraged to grow. At night, around the large bonfire in the center of the courtyard, stories were told. They were no longer legends of kings and battles, but narratives about the importance of cooperation, generosity, and healing through nature. Ilar, sitting among his grandsons and the community members, felt the human connection stronger than ever. He saw in everyone's eyes gratitude, hope, and renewed purpose. True wealth, he knew, was not measured in gold or lands, but in the health of his grandsons, the prosperity of the community, and the peace that finally filled his heart. The memory of Ilara, his beloved wife, was a constant presence, an invisible embrace that enveloped him. He knew she would be proud of what he had built, of the life he had rescued from the clutches of despair. That place, the Forgotten Fort, was now a beacon of hope, a sanctuary where ancient wisdom mingled with the love of a family and the strength of a community. Elar closed his eyes for an instant, feeling the warmth of the sun on his wrinkled face, a gentle smile playing on his lips. The journey had been long and arduous, but every step had been worth it. The legacy was not just healing, but the building of a future where compassion and knowledge would be the true treasures, passed down from generation to generation, ensuring that hope would never fade. He opened his eyes, watching Leo and Kyle, his grandsons, who now approached with wide smiles. Life, after all, was a truly invaluable gift.